My parents gave gifts to everyone, except my daughter. I had enough. I never expected things to turn out this way with my parents. Growing up, I always thought family meant unconditional love and support. But as the years went by, I started noticing little things, subtle gestures, small exclusions, moments that didn't quite sit right. And then, after my daughter was born, those little things turned into something undeniable. My name is Rachel, and I live in Denver, Colorado. I'm 32 years old, a single mother to my beautiful daughter, Olivia. She's 6 now, full of life and energy, with the brightest blue eyes and the kind of laugh that can turn any bad day around. I work as a graphic designer for a marketing firm, and while life isn't always easy, I've built something stable for us. I have my own apartment, I pay my bills on time, and most importantly, I give Olivia all the love and attention she deserves. My parents, Thomas and Margaret, live about 30 minutes away in a suburban neighborhood. They've always been more traditional in their thinking, favoring my younger brother, Jason, in ways that I used to convince myself were just coincidences. Jason is 28, married to Emily, and they have 2 children, Lucas, who is 5, and Ava, who just turned 3. My parents adore them. They shower them with gifts, attention, and visits. And while I never expected my parents to treat Olivia better than their other grandchildren, I also never expected them to treat her as if she didn't exist. I noticed it for the first time when Olivia was 2. We were at my parents' house for Christmas. Jason's kids had mountains of presents, wrapped toys, books, clothes, personalized items with their names embroidered on them. Olivia, on the other hand, got a single coloring book and a box of crayons, the kind you'd pick up last minute at the checkout aisle. I brushed it off, telling myself that maybe they had just forgotten, or maybe it was a mistake. But over the years, it kept happening. Every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering, the pattern continued. Gifts for Jason's kids, thoughtful and expensive ones, while Olivia received little or nothing. It wasn't just about the material things, either. My parents would invite Jason's family over for dinners, take his kids on weekend trips to the zoo, to amusement parks, to the movies. Olivia and I were rarely included. When we were invited, it felt like an afterthought. I tried to talk myself out of my feelings, not wanting to believe that my parents would intentionally exclude my daughter, but eventually, the truth became impossible to ignore. Last year was the worst. It was Christmas again, and I had decided not to let Olivia feel left out. I bought her a new dress, wrapped special gifts just for her, and made sure we had a great morning together before heading to my parents' house. When we arrived, the living room was filled with decorations, a beautiful tree with neatly wrapped presents spilling out from underneath. Jason's kids were already opening gifts, excitement filling the air. Olivia sat beside me, her little hands resting in her lap as she watched. My mother handed out gift after gift. This one's for Lucas. Ava, look what Grandma got you. Olivia's name was never called. She looked up at me, her expression a mixture of confusion and quiet disappointment. When I finally saw the small, impersonal gift bag my parents handed her, another set of crayons, I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't about the money, the gifts, or even the favoritism anymore. It was about the message. The clear, undeniable message that my daughter didn't matter as much as Jason's kids did. That night, as I put Olivia to bed, she asked me, "Mommy, why doesn't Grandma and Grandpa love me like they love Lucas and Ava?" I didn't have an answer. I hugged her tightly, whispering that she was loved beyond measure. But in that moment, I knew things had to change. I couldn't keep excusing their behavior. I couldn't let Olivia grow up feeling unwanted or lesser than. The next day, I called my mother. I asked her, plain and simple, why they treated Olivia differently. She hesitated before giving me the same empty excuses. "Oh, we just didn't know what to get her, or we didn't mean anything by it." But how could that be true when they always knew exactly what to get Jason's kids? When they went out of their way to make them feel special? I pressed further, but my mother only grew defensive. She accused me of overreacting, of trying to create problems where there weren't any. "You're always so sensitive, Rachel. We love Olivia, but things are just different." Different? That was the moment I realized there was no changing their mindset. My parents had made their choice, and no matter how much it hurt, I needed to make mine. I wasn't going to let Olivia grow up feeling like an afterthought in her own family. That was the last Christmas we spent with them. Since then, I've made an effort to build a different kind of family for Olivia. My best friend, Sarah, and her husband have welcomed us into their lives like we were truly part of their family. Their kids play with Olivia, and holidays are spent in a home filled with warmth and genuine love. The weeks after that Christmas were filled with a mixture of emotions that I struggled to process. As I watched my parents hand out presents to everyone but my daughter, I couldn't shake the bitter realization of how deep their favoritism ran. It wasn't just an oversight, it was a conscious choice that left a lasting impression on me and, more importantly, on Olivia. As we walked home that night, I saw Olivia clutching the little stuffed bunny that my brother's wife had given her out of pity. She had said almost nothing since we left my parents' house, but her silence was heavier than any words she might have said. That night, after I put her to bed, I sat on the couch, staring at the Christmas tree in our living room. The flickering lights did little to ease my chest. In the days that followed, I wondered if I should argue with my parents. Part of me wanted to tell them I was wrong, but deep down I knew it wasn't a misunderstanding. It had been going on for years, but now it was impossible to ignore. When I finally called my mother, her response was as dismissive as I had expected. "We just didn't know what she wanted," she said. "And besides, she's too young to notice these things." But Olivia wasn't too young. She noticed. And if she didn't understand everything at the time, she would soon if this behavior continued. A few months later, Easter came, and as usual, my parents had a get-together. The whole family was invited, and despite everything that had happened at Christmas, I decided to go. I told myself that maybe I had overdone it, that maybe this time would be different. But as soon as we got there, it was clear that nothing had changed. All the children ran into the yard, where my parents had set up an Easter egg hunt. Baskets were prepared for each of the grandchildren except Olivia, filled with chocolates, candies, and small toys. I watched her hesitate at the door, examining the row of baskets lined up on the patio table. My mother walked past her, handing the basket to my niece and nephews, but when Olivia turned to her expectantly, she patted her on the head and said, "You can share with the other children." Anger boiled in my chest, but I forced myself to remain calm, not wanting to make a scene in front of everyone. Olivia, always the sweet and understanding child, didn't complain. She just nodded and stood next to me, while the other children ran away excitedly. I knelt down and whispered to her, "Let's go get our special treat later, okay?" She nodded again, a faint smile on her face. But that wasn't the worst part of the day. At dinner, my mom made a big show of giving the kids presents, stuffed bunnies, books, and small toys. Again, Olivia got nothing. My dad smiled and said, "Well, she's always with you, so she doesn't need anything." That night, I made the decision to distance myself from my parents. I wasn't going to let them treat my daughter like an afterthought. I didn't need their approval or their gifts, but I wasn't going to let them make my daughter feel less than. Months passed, and I kept my distance. I didn't block them out completely, but I no longer regularly attended family gatherings. The next birthday party was my nephew's, and we weren't invited. My daughter-in-law texted me apologetically, saying she didn't know why my parents hadn't included us. I told her not to worry about it. As Olivia got older, she started asking questions. Why doesn't Grandma give me presents like she gives everyone else? I tried to keep my answers neutral, but I could see the confusion in her eyes. One day after school, she told me about a classmate's grandmother who always brought her grandchildren cookies. "Why doesn't Grandma ever do that for me?" she asked. That's when I knew I had to have a serious talk with my parents. I called my mom and told her bluntly that Olivia had noticed their behavior. Mom sighed and said, "You always make a big deal out of nothing." I reminded her every time they excluded my daughter, every time they ignored her while they were admiring my brother's children. My mother's response was remarkably straightforward, "It's not favoritism, we just have a different connection with them." That was the moment I realized there was nothing I could say to change their minds. They had made their choice, and now I had to make mine. I wasn't going to let my daughter grow up feeling unwanted in her own family. After that conversation, I stopped reaching out. I focused on the people who truly cared about us. My best friend Claire, who had always treated Olivia like her own niece, started inviting us to family celebrations. My in-laws, though not wealthy, always included Olivia in every family tradition. It wasn't about the gifts, it was about the love and effort. Then, last Christmas, my parents reached out to me for the first time in months. My mother texted, "Are you and Olivia coming to Christmas dinner?" I stared at the text for a long time. I thought about the years of estrangement, the hurt, the neglect. Then I looked at Olivia, sitting on the floor, playing with the set of toy horses Claire had given her. She was happy. She was loved. She was enough. I never responded to my mother's text. That Christmas, we spent the day with people who truly cared about us. Olivia never asked about my parents. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. As the months passed, I gradually came to terms with the fact that my parents would never change. No matter how many times I tried to make them understand how much their actions had hurt Olivia, they continued to dismiss my concerns. They were stuck in their ways, and I realized that no amount of pleading or reasoning would ever make them see my daughter as someone worthy of their love and attention. I stopped waiting for invitations to family gatherings. As the holidays approached, we would spend them with close friends who had become our real family. On Christmas Eve, we would bake cookies together, watch Olivia's favorite movies, and exchange precious gifts. She never had to feel like she was less important than anyone else in the room. For her birthday, I made sure she had a day filled with joy. She picked out decorations, baked her favorite cake, and threw a little party with her closest friends. I wanted her to know she was loved, even if my parents refused to be a part of her life the way she deserved. My parents, however, continued their traditions with my sister and her children. I saw photos online, elaborate birthday parties, matching holiday outfits, vacations to theme parks. At first, the images were overwhelming. But over time, I learned to scroll through them without feeling that familiar sense of resentment. Their choices no longer determined my happiness. Olivia would ask about them from time to time. "Why aren't my grandparents coming to my birthday party?" she asked one night as I tucked her into bed. It was a simple question, but its weight weighed on me. I had to choose my words carefully. I told her that some people don't always know how to love others properly, but that it has nothing to do with her worth. I reminded her of all the people who loved her, her friends, her teachers, the kind neighbors who always brought her treats, and most importantly, me. One day, out of the blue, I got a call from my mom. It had been almost a year since we last spoke. Her voice was light, as if nothing had happened. She casually mentioned that they were planning a family reunion and that I should bring Olivia. "Everyone will be there," she said. "It will be a great chance for her to see her cousins." I took a deep breath. In the past, I might have jumped at the chance to make things right, but I had changed. I had seen too much to believe that this was anything more than an empty gesture. I calmly told her that we had other plans. She looked surprised, maybe even a little annoyed. But for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like I owed them anything. After I hung up the phone, I looked over at Olivia, who was sitting at the kitchen table, drawing. She turned to me and smiled, holding up her photo. It was a bright, colorful scene of the two of us standing under a big tree, our little house in the background. In that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. My daughter would never have to wonder if she was loved. She would never have to doubt her place in my heart. Family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up, who chooses you, who loves you unconditionally. And Mia would always have that, even if it didn't come from the people who were supposed to give it to her. In the end, I chose peace. I chose my daughter. And it was the best decision I ever made.